That very day, in the presence of the judge and her husband, she was asked a big question. Judge asked, "Why do you chose to love the man that does not love you back? Is this the life you chose to live forever?" She shed more tears to answer. Marcus grew up in a small apartment where the wallpaper peeled in strips and the fridge hummed louder than the TV. His father was gone by the time Marcus turned 6, leaving his mother to raise him and 2 younger sisters alone. She worked double shifts at a nursing home, came home smelling of bleach and tired feet, but still managed to tell her children that one day things would be better. Marcus learned early how to hold himself like he had more than he did. He ironed his school shirts with a second-hand press and walked like his sneakers were new even when the soles were flapping loose. At school he was quick with words, quicker with a smile, the kind of boy who could talk his way out of a fight or into the good graces of a teacher who'd already given up on half the class. But beneath that charm was hunger, a need for more than what life seemed willing to hand him. Danielle's beginning was softer but no less heavy. She was born in a small suburban house just 3 bus stops from Marcus's block. Her father worked as a delivery driver and her mother ran a hair salon out of the front room. From the outside it looked steady, but inside was a constant hum of bills stacked too high, arguments that echoed down hallways, and a girl who learned to disappear into books to escape the noise. Danielle had a quiet smile, the kind that slipped out when she thought no one was looking, and a heart that leaned toward caring for others. Teachers said she had steady hands and a sharp mind, perfect for nursing. By 18 she was enrolled in a program, balancing lectures with helping her aunt who'd fallen sick. But before I continue, I want you to do me a favor: hit that subscribe button, give a like and drop your country in the comments. I will love to know where you are watching from. Thank you. So let's get started. Their worlds brushed close for years without colliding. They rode the same buses, passed each other in corner stores, shared space without knowing it. The first time Marcus noticed her was at a community cookout one July afternoon. Smoke curled from the grills, plastic chairs bent under the weight of gossiping neighbors, children darted between legs with red cups sloshing soda. Marcus was 23, selling phones at the mall kiosk and talking about big moves. Danielle was 21. Her scrubs faintly wrinkled from a night shift at the diner where she picked up extra hours. He saw her across the tables, head bent toward her aunt's wheelchair, laughing softly as she adjusted the woman's blanket. Something about her, gentleness wrapped in steel, made him pause mid-sentence. When their eyes finally met, it was fleeting but it lingered, like a note held too long. Later he found himself walking past her on the way to the trash bins, blurting out a joke about the smoke being strong enough to season clothes. She smiled, the kind of smile that encouraged a second sentence, and suddenly they were talking like they'd been doing it for years. In the weeks that followed, their lives began to braid together in small ways. Danielle caught the late bus, Marcus slid into the seat beside her. He'd talk about getting out of the kiosk grind, maybe stepping into logistics or sales, something bigger. She'd nod, listening, offering encouragement without flattery. They split sandwiches when pockets were light, counted change on chipped kitchen tables, laughed at their own struggles because laughter was cheaper than despair. But life had a way of testing them quickly. Marcus landed a job at a logistics firm, wearing shirts pressed crisp, shoes polished until he could see his reflection. He told Danielle this was his entry into real rooms, real money. She didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she packed his lunches, studied bookkeeping at night so she could help track every cent he brought home. They moved into a small one-bedroom with thin walls where neighbors argued loudly, and the promise they made each other was simple: they would never let shouting be their language. The first tension came quietly, like water seeping under a door. Marcus wanted to look the part of success. A new watch, a better car, dinners out when they hadn't paid the light bill. Danielle noticed the numbers slipping, the late fees piling. She tried to warn him but he waved her off. "Don't worry. I got us." Her worry grew anyway, silent and sharp. Then came the pregnancy test, glowing in her hand one humid evening. Joy, fear, both crashing together. Marcus swore he'd step up, be better, do whatever it took. And for a time, he tried. Bills mounted faster than his paychecks. His pride made him chase appearances, while Danielle tried to ground them in balance. Arguments surfaced, not shouts but tense silences, the kind that cut deeper than words. She worked longer shifts, came home with swollen feet, and still managed to cradle his ambition like it was her own child. But cracks were forming, hairline fractures in the promise they once whispered against thin apartment walls. She started keeping the ledgers tighter. Paper notebook on the counter. Rent in one column. Groceries in another. Doctor visits. Prenatal vitamins. Bus cards. Every line was a choice. Marcus would look over her shoulder and kiss the top of her head and say he had it handled. She'd nod. She wanted to believe him. She was carrying their child. Belief felt like a duty. First doctor visit as a pair. Bright lights. Clean walls. The soft whoosh of a tiny heartbeat filling the room. Danielle gripped his fingers and exhaled. Marcus blinked fast like he had dust in his eyes. On the way home he promised again. He was going to be the man his mother prayed for and the father he never had. He said it out loud like a vow. Windows down. Warm air washing the car. The promise sat between them like a fragile thing in a shoebox. They both tried not to jostle it. Then the next bill came. He bought a pair of shoes to look right for a client meeting and told himself it was a tool for work. She circled numbers in the notebook and underlined them. He brushed past it. Just until the commission hits, he said, and lifted her feet onto his lap and massaged them after her shift. He meant it. He always meant it in the moment he said it. He came from work. New manager with a sharp smile. Wanted numbers at any cost. Client dinners. Happy hours. Be there or be invisible. Marcus started staying out late to shake hands and sell the idea of himself. The room loved him. He could talk. He could read faces. He came home smelling like strong cologne that wasn't his and the lime from cheap mixers. Danielle didn't accuse. She watched. She listened to the quiet and how it changed shape. On a gray Tuesday when the car coughed and died in the middle lane. He rode the shoulder slow and pulled into a gas station with the hood steaming. The mechanic said it wasn't a big fix, but big enough for their wallet. He put it on a credit card that already carried too much. Danielle stood beside him, one hand resting on her belly, and asked for the receipt. She folded it into the notebook like a thin blade. Marcus' mother began to visit more. She had love for Danielle and also opinions that came wrapped in that same love. A man needs to look like something, she said one afternoon while folding clean towels. Doors open for the well-dressed. Danielle kept her tone even. Doors also open when the bills are paid. The room cooled a little. Marcus switched the topic to baby names. They all softened and laughed again. Then later, behind a closed door, he said she'd made him look small. She stared at the floor and said nothing. A new kind of quiet found them. It settled and wouldn't leave. Baby shower at the church basement. Streamers taped to cinder block. Friends from the diner. 2 of his coworkers. A cake with wobbly blue icing and a plastic stroller on top. He held up tiny socks and everyone cheered. He believed again for a whole afternoon. The future looked like a straight hallway. Then Monday came and the hallway bent. He missed one prenatal appointment. Traffic. A client who showed up late and still expected to be fed. He sent a quick text. Be there soon. He wasn't. She sat in the exam room alone and watched the clock tick. She told herself not to hold it against him. She failed. Something hard grew in her. The kind of hardness that forms around a piece of glass so it stops cutting. The baby came early. Late summer storm smashing rain against city windows. Her aunt dozing in a chair. A contraction that didn't feel like the others. Then another. She called him. No answer. She called a second time. He picked up in a room full of voices. I'm on my way, he said, and meant it, and also meant to finish the pitch he was halfway through. She gripped the counter with both hands and breathed like she was pushing through water. By the time he reached the hospital, she was pale and sweaty but steady. He took her hand and kept saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. The nurse told him to talk less and breathe with her. He did. He matched her. He whispered prayers he hadn't said since he was a kid. Hours stretched and snapped. Then a cry tore the room. Their son arrived with a full head of dark hair and a tiny fist like his father's. They named him Jalen. For a little while the world went quiet. Just the three of them under soft light. A moment that felt like a promise kept. Nights at home were a drum. Feedings. Diapers. Bursts of sleep. Danielle's body ached. Her mind kept lists. Marcus tried. He did the midnight bottle. He sang off key. He rocked until his arms trembled. He also woke up late 3 times in 1 week, and the new manager pulled him into a glass office and stared through him. Clock in on time. Hit your targets. Or we find someone hungry enough to take your chair. Marcus nodded and swallowed his anger. In a dumb choice. He opened a store card in Danielle's name because the clerk said the discount would help now and the payments would be light later. He told himself he'd pay it before it mattered. He bought a suit on sale and a briefcase that looked like it had seen airports. Danielle found the letter with the card statement and felt heat crawl up her neck. She waited until Jalen was asleep. She put the letter on the table and sat across from him. Did you sign my name? He tried a joke first. It died fast. He said he'd pay it off. He said it was for them. She said the word trust like a door closing. She kept on to ask him, how could you do that? That night, for the first time they had been together, Marcus slapped Danielle. They slept back to back that night. His phone lit up after midnight with a message from an old-time female college friend. Tanya. Nothing wild. Just a checking up message, I miss you meme. Danielle stared at the glow and felt something sour rise in her. It wasn't proof of anything. It still hurt. She didn't say a word. The room did the saying for her. Very early in the morning, pressure stepped in with a knock. The landlord. Polite but firm. Grace period used up. Late fees like small teeth. Marcus kept his shoulders broad and his voice calm. I got you. Friday. He said it again after the door closed. Friday arrived and the commission didn't. A week later, Marcus walked in with a new plan. A side deal with a guy from a warehouse. Commissions off the books. Faster money, fewer rules. Danielle stared at him. What rules? He waved his hand. Nothing wild. Referrals. I connect. They pay. Her stomach tightened. He read her face. I'm doing this for us, he said. It was true and also not true. He was doing it for the feeling of being the man he kept saying he'd be. Thing was not right between them for some days on the issues. They tried counseling at a church on the corner. Elderly couple who'd been married 40 years sat with them in a room that smelled like lemon cleaner and weak coffee. Tell the truth, the wife said. Say it plain. But say it gently. They did for 3 weeks. They even laughed once or twice. Then Marcus missed a session for a last-minute client dinner that ran long, and the counselor said, "You keep choosing rooms that don't love you back," and the word stuck like a splinter under his skin. One fateful weekend. Danielle opened a bank app and saw a transfer she didn't recognize. He had moved their joint money out to cover a payment she did not know anything about, yet there is domestic bills to settle at home. She sat at the table and waited for him to come home. He walked in tired. Shoes noisy. She slid the phone across to him. "I can't hold this up by myself," she said. He asked for grace. She said grace had to live beside truth. He said he was drowning. She said, "Then stop acting like you own a boat." Before she could land, he slapped Danielle again, that make it the second beat. That night she cried in the bathroom with the shower running so no one would hear. She looked at her face in the mirror and promised herself she wouldn't break. Not now. Not with the baby asleep in the next room. The fight was quiet. The kind that adds up to a large sum after a long time. He packed a bag and said it was just for a few days. Clear his head. Crash at Lamar's. He kissed Jalen's forehead and stood at the door longer than he needed to. She wanted to ask him to stay. The words didn't come. He left. The door clicked. The apartment exhaled and felt bigger and colder at the same time. He texted every day. She texted back. Short lines. Updates on the baby. No talk about the center of the problem. She started to breathe easier in some strange way. Fewer shoes to trip over. Fewer shadows to decode. She missed him anyway. But Marcus did not care about checking up on the baby and her anymore. Marcus is free texting Tanya every day. After some days they both landed in a courthouse. Child support hearing. Forms. Chairs that made your back hurt. A judge with eyes that saw through fog. Marcus stood in a shirt he ironed 3 times. Danielle wore a simple dress and held a folder with tabs. They were polite. They were careful. The judge asked direct questions. Numbers had to be said out loud. Income. Rent. Debt. A picture of a life in digits. Marcus felt exposed. Danielle felt tired. The order came down. Nothing cruel. Just math. He nodded and looked at the floor. She nodded and looked at him. For a second they saw the same story. 2 people, one trying and one failing, an unbalanced ratio. Danielle kept building. Word of mouth did what flyers can't. 2 clients turned into 5. She made a simple spreadsheet and a simple system. She kept every receipt in a clear folder. She learned to invoice without apology. She paid rent on time for the first stretch in months. She bought a used laptop with cash. She exhaled and felt her shoulders drop for the first time in a year. In space of months Marcus couldn't stand how steady she looked. He told himself she was judging him every time she didn't say anything. He took a contract job with a courier company and told himself it was a stopgap. Then the engine light came on again and the stopgap started to feel like a road. He met a woman on a route who laughed at his jokes. He liked feeling big again. He didn't cross a line. He stood near it. Danielle could feel the nearness of that line even without seeing it. That's the thing about long love. You sense the weather before the clouds appear. They went back to the counselor one more time. The older husband looked at Marcus. You can't spend money to buy respect, he said. You earn it by showing up, and to be responsible also be truthful to each other. Marcus nodded and swallowed. Danielle looked at her hands. She said she was tired of holding the whole house with fingers that were already cracked. The counselor asked them to take a week and write what staying would look like. They took the week and wrote. Marcus wrote a plan with numbers and promises. Danielle wrote a plan with boundaries and non-negotiables. When they read them out loud, they sounded like two different languages. You can still love somebody and not speak their language anymore. They separated. Not with a slam. With a long sigh. He moved into a small place with a fold-out couch and a view of a brick wall. She stayed with Jalen and her aunt. The landlord shook her hand when the rent hit the first of the month. The world didn't end. It just went on. Time passed one bus ride at a time. Jalen learned to sit. Then crawl. Then pull himself up on the coffee table and grin like he'd solved gravity. Marcus came by 3 nights a week and on Sundays. He brought snacks he shouldn't. He brought toy cars that rolled under the couch. He brought hope that he'd still figure it out. Danielle welcomed him in and kept a line around her heart that he couldn't see but could feel. Her aunt passed in the early winter. Quietly. A light went out in the back bedroom. Danielle handled the calls and the forms and the small service. Marcus stood beside her and held the stroller and cried without talking. Grief has a way of washing hate out of a room. They hugged for a long time on the church steps. The cold air stung their cheeks. For a second she thought about asking him home. She didn't. The line held. The new year brought a door Danielle didn't expect. One of her bookkeeping clients introduced her to a man who ran a small delivery company on the south side. He needed help untangling invoices. He had drivers. He had trucks. He didn't have systems. His name was Mr. Rivers. Late 50s. Calm voice. Hands like someone who still lifted boxes when he had to. He paid her modestly at first. Then fairly. Then he asked for more hours and put her name on forms as an outside consultant. You have a good eye, he said. You see where the money goes to hide. She smiled and said thank you and then went home and added a new tab to her folder. She didn't post about it. She didn't tell many people. Sometimes quiet is power. Mark signed up for a sales seminar at a hotel by the highway. He took notes like he was back in high school trying to impress a teacher. He sent resumes out like paper boats into a river. Then came on Monday morning just an email. Mr. Rivers asked Danielle to come to a meeting. Come sit in, he said. Take notes. Your questions cut clean. She arrived in a simple blouse and flats and sat with her notebook ready. 2 executives from a larger logistics company were at the table. They wanted to fold Mr. Rivers's routes into a bigger map. He'd keep a stake. He wanted to make sure the books were right before a handshake turned into ink. They started talking in terms that used to scare her. Margins. Net 30. Liability. She didn't flinch. She asked where the choke points were and how they planned to handle overtime. The younger executive blinked and smiled. Who are you again? Mr. Rivers said, she's why we aren't bleeding out. He looked at Danielle. I should have put a title on you months ago. Weeks later the papers were signed. Rivers Logistics grew a second branch. He pulled Danielle aside and slid a small packet across the desk. I'm tired, he said. You see straight. I want you inside, not outside. It was an offer letter. Part-time at first. Then full-time when she was ready. Salary. Health benefits. A small equity slice that felt unreal. Danielle stood there with the paper in her hands and thought of every night she counted coins on a kitchen counter and laughed so she wouldn't scream. She nodded. She shook his hand. She left his office and sat in her car and cried into the steering wheel. Not sad. Just full. She didn't tell Marcus or anyone right away. Not from spite. She wanted to be sure the ground was solid. That weekend at the child support review, the judge asked routine questions and glanced at her documents. Marcus heard numbers he couldn't make sense of. Income from consulting. Projected salary. The judge adjusted obligations fairly. No one cheated anyone. Even so, the air shifted. The story everyone thought they knew about who was barely holding on bent in the middle. Marcus felt the bend like a pop in his ears. He kept his face calm. Inside, something hit the floor. After court, they stood on the steps with their coats open to new sun. He said, "You doing big things?" She said, "Trying to do steady things." He nodded. He laughed once, short and real. "You always were the one with the ledgers." She looked at him and almost reached for his hand. Then she put both hands on the stroller. "We can still do right by each other," she said. "No matter what shape we take." He nodded again and looked at Jalen gnawing on a toy giraffe. "That's the whole point," he said. The reveal kept revealing as seasons changed. Danielle moved to a small townhome near a park. Nothing flashy. Clean. Sunlight through the living room in the mornings. She set up a corner desk with her laptop and a whiteboard. Numbers. Schedules. Small wins. She started sleeping deeper. She found a sitter she trusted. She bought her mother a new dryer for the salon. Quiet gifts. No speeches. Marcus rode the courier grind and then landed a steady position at a different warehouse. Night shift. Better supervisor. He stopped chasing rooms that clapped when he lied about himself. He started chasing his son's bedtime instead. Small change. Big effect. He showed up tired and still played with cars on the carpet. He didn't always say the right thing to Danielle. He said honest things more than he used to. That helped. One Sunday at a park, while Jalen attacked a swing with joy, a man paused near them and waved at Jalen, then at Danielle. He had seen her at Rivers Logistics. He handled insurance for small fleets. His name was Carter. Late 30s. Soft laugh. A widower with a calm way of standing that made people breathe easier. They talked about trucks at first. Then about daycare spots and the price of bananas. He didn't ask for her number. He gave her his card and said, "If you ever want to compare notes on vendors." No pressure. She put the card in her purse and forgot about it for 2 days. Then remembered it and texted with a short question. He answered with a short answer. They kept it light. They kept it human. This could have been a story that tried to turn itself into a shiny reel. It didn't. It stayed real. Bills kept coming. Jalen kept growing. Marcus kept trying. Danielle kept building. The drama that grabs. Carter showed up to a Riverside festival with his niece and ran into Danielle near a funnel cake stand. They laughed about powdered sugar and sat on a low wall watching kids run in crooked lines. He didn't push. He asked her the simple questions no one asks once a woman becomes a mother. What music was in her headphones last week? What book she put down halfway because life got loud? She surprised herself by answering with ease. When he walked them to their car, he leaned in and played peekaboo with Jalen through the window until the baby shrieked and kicked. Danielle felt her guard lower, not like a drawbridge clanging down but like a window you finally open on the first warm day. One night on her couch after Jalen finally gave up and slept, Danielle said yes to dinner with Carter. A cheap Thai spot with a fish tank in the corner. They talked like two people who understood time had real weight. No games. No resume posing. He told her about the year after his wife passed and how silence was a thing you could hear. She told him about the night in the bathroom with the shower running and the mirror. He didn't reach across the table to fix her. He just listened. Sometimes listening is the only fix that matters. Weeks turned to a season. The company grew. Her title changed to operations and finance. She didn't blast it online. She just kept doing the work. Mr. Rivers started leaving earlier in the evenings. He said, "You got it," and she said, "I got it." And she did. Marcus got promoted to shift lead. It wasn't a crown. It was a set of keys and a clipboard. It felt like something. He started putting a little aside each paycheck. First 20. Then 50. Then 100. He caught himself thinking about buying a ring one day and laughed and shook his head and told himself to slow down and learn to hold steady before he tried to hold something as heavy as another marriage. Danielle and Marcus sat in a quiet diner one afternoon to talk about a new routine. They split fries while Jalen slept in the stroller. "You're doing good," he said. She shrugged. "Trying to do right." He nodded. "Carter seems decent." She nodded back. "He is. He shows up." The words were a soft landing, not a shot. Marcus took them like medicine. He thanked her later in a text. She replied with a thumbs up and a small heart. No heat. Just peace. Spring rolled in. The park filled with kids again. Rivers Logistics moved into a better office with windows that didn't stick. Carter met Danielle's mother and fixed a wobbly shelf in the salon without being asked. One day Mr. Rivers called Danielle into his office and closed the door. "I'm selling the rest of my stake," he said. "To a partner I trust. You're part of that deal if you want it." She sat still. The words took a long second to find places in her head. He slid a paper across. It wasn't lottery big. It was real. It meant she had a piece of a thing that made money while she slept. He smiled. "You built this with me," he said. "Don't argue. Take the win." She laughed and cried at the same time and said okay. That night she told Marcus on the porch when he came to drop off Jalen. He listened and smiled and then sat down on the step and stared at the street like it was a movie screen. "I'm proud of you," he said. She said thank you and meant it deep. Then he said, "I'm going to be okay too," and she looked at him and saw that he might be right this time. That summer Carter asked Danielle a question in the kitchen while pasta boiled and music played low. "Can we try this for real?" he said. "Time. Home. The whole thing. Slow and honest." She said yes with both hands and a laugh. A year later they signed papers at a courthouse with a handful of family and went to eat tacos after. No limo. No fireworks. Just two people who knew what peace felt like and chose it. Jalen got a baby brother, shock 3 at once. The news came during a routine scan when the tech grinned and said, "I'm hearing a choir. Triplets. 3 boys stacking kicks inside one small home." Carter went from calm to wide-eyed and back to calm in one breath. Danielle sat very still and then started laughing so hard she cried again. Life had written a plot twist with a generous hand. Family flooded the house with diapers and casseroles and prayers. Marcus walked in with a crate of formula and stood by the bassinet and shook his head and said, "Lord, you don't play small." He held one tiny fist and then another and then the third and whispered a blessing over each forehead. Carter watched him with a mixture of caution and respect. Men who've been cut by the same blade know how to nod without words. The years moved. Not fast. Not slow. Just real. Jalen started school. The triplets learned to sit like a row of small kings. Danielle's name began to carry weight in rooms where numbers matter. Marcus kept showing up. He failed a supervisor exam once and passed it the second time. He dated a little. He kept it clean. He learned how to say no to the part of himself that wanted applause he didn't earn. And then a message came to Danielle's phone. An old mutual friend sent a link with a line. "Did you see this?" It was a photo on a wedding website. Marcus. Tuck sharp. Smile bright. A woman beside him with a bouquet and a dress that caught the light. The date was set for early fall. The venue was a rented hall with chandeliers shaped like upside-down flowers. Danielle stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because she wanted him. Because life had turned a full circle and she felt it. Carter walked in with a bag of groceries. She turned the phone and showed him. He nodded. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded back. "I am." The invitation came a week later. Hand-delivered by a cousin of Marcus who always liked a little mess. "He wanted you to have it," the cousin said, eyes bright with something she didn't hide. Danielle accepted it. She placed it on the counter. She and Carter talked that night. Peaceful talk. No heat. She said she didn't need to go. He said he'd stand with her if she chose to. They agreed to think on it. The triplets snored like tiny engines in the next room. Word floated through the circle that the new bride had strong feelings about Danielle. That she had said some things at a brunch. People talk. People add salt. Danielle ignored what she could and prayed through the rest. Marcus texted a week out. "You coming?" She wrote back. "I don't know yet." He typed. He erased. He typed again. It would mean a lot. She set the phone down and looked at her sleeping boys and thought about all the rooms she had walked out of to protect her peace. She also thought about all the rooms she had walked into to reclaim her voice. On the morning she made her choice, the sky was clean and blue. She pressed a simple dress and combed edges and kissed foreheads. Carter stood behind her at the mirror and straightened his tie. "You sure?" he said. She nodded. "I'm not going for him," she said. "I'm going for the story. For the record." He smiled. "Then let's write it clean." The ride to the venue felt longer than it was. The limousine hummed softly, leather cool against her palms. The triplets sat in pressed little suits, their ties crooked in ways that made her laugh despite herself. Jalen kept them entertained, passing snacks in secret and whispering jokes that made all three erupt in high-pitched giggles. Carter sat steady at her side, his hand resting near hers without pressing, offering presents without demand. At the hall, heads turned before she even reached the steps. The limousine door lifted slow, almost ceremonial, and light struck the polished shoes of the boys as they stepped out one by one, each face stamped with features no one could deny. Murmurs swelled like a wave. Phones lifted. People elbowed each other. Jalen held his brother's hands and walked them forward like a captain leading a parade. Danielle rose last, smoothing her dress, spine straight, eyes calm. She didn't hurry. She let them watch. She let the silence stretch until it snapped into gasps. Inside, the ceremony had already begun. Marcus stood at the altar, shoulders squared, eyes on the aisle. For a heartbeat he forgot to breathe. The sight unraveled him, the woman he once tried to bury under shame, walking with grace, flanked by sons who carried his jawline, his walk, his stubborn tilt of chin. The crowd shifted, whispers racing faster than the music could cover. The bride turned her head, confusion tightening into something harder. Danielle met Marcus's gaze for one long moment. Neither smiled. Neither flinched. Just recognition, heavy and undeniable. Carter walked a step behind, not to take light but to hold ground. He adjusted one triplet's collar, bent to whisper encouragement, then lifted his head high. People noticed him too, the man at her side, steady and unbothered. It wasn't a spectacle anymore, it was a reckoning. Every rumor, every assumption about who had fallen and who had risen collapsed in that aisle. Danielle didn't gloat. She didn't bow. She simply walked forward, each step rewriting the story that was meant to crush her. The music faltered for a beat, the pianist's fingers slipping as eyes followed Danielle and the children instead of the bride. Murmurs swelled like a storm inside the hall, 1,000 small judgments carried on the same air. Danielle kept her chin level, her steps unhurried. The triplets clutched each other's hands, wide-eyed but brave, their matching suits making them look like little reflections in a mirror. Jalen led them with quiet pride, glancing back once at his mother to be sure she was still steady. Marcus's throat tightened. He had imagined her broken, imagined whispers about her failures, imagined her presence as an ornament of his triumph. Instead she had turned the stage into hers. He could feel the heat of every stare, the silent question pressed against his ribs. Did you know? Did you let her go? His new bride shifted beside him, her smile brittle as glass. She tried to reclaim the moment with a nervous laugh, but the sound landed flat against the heavy air. Danielle reached the front row and paused. She didn't look at the bride. She didn't need to. She found an empty seat, helped the boys into their places, and smoothed Jalen's collar with the same gentle focus she'd carried through every storm of her life. Carter slid in beside her, his presence quiet, solid, like a shield she didn't have to ask for. For a moment the entire room felt suspended, as if the vows, the decorations, the carefully planned day all bent around her arrival. Then the officiant cleared his throat, stammering to restart the ceremony. But nothing sounded the same anymore. The story had already shifted. What was supposed to be humiliation had turned into revelation, and everyone there would carry that picture home. Danielle, strong, composed, flanked by children who bore the undeniable stamp of legacy, and a partner who stood like stone at her side. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to turn back to the officiant, but his hands trembled. He knew the rest of the ceremony would pass like a blur. Whatever words were spoken at that altar, whatever promises made, the true moment, the one that would be remembered, replayed, retold in whispers, had already happened. The officiant's voice droned on, phrases about love and unity falling flat against the weight in the room. Guests tried to fix their attention forward, but their eyes betrayed them, slipping back to Danielle and the children. The bride's fingers tightened around Marcus's arm, nails pressing through the fabric of his tuxedo sleeve. She forced a smile for the cameras, but her jaw quivered. The photographers hesitated, unsure where to point their lenses, toward the altar, or toward the woman whose entrance had stolen the air itself. Danielle sat still, her posture regal, her calm presence louder than any outburst could have been. The triplets fidgeted, whispering small questions only she could hear. She hushed them gently, smoothing a curl here, straightening a bow tie there. Jalen leaned closer and whispered, "Mom, everyone's staring." She met his eyes and said softly, "Then let them see the truth." He smiled, shoulders squaring with a pride too big for his age. Marcus tried to read his vows. The words stumbled, his voice cracked, and for the first time in years he felt naked in front of his world. Every ambition, every choice, every mistake stood tall in the silence between sentences. He looked out at the crowd and found his mother, her lips pressed in a thin line, her gaze flicking between him and Danielle. He found co-workers whispering behind folded programs, relatives shifting in their seats. Shame flushed hot across his face. When the bride repeated her vows, her voice carried a tremor. She darted a glance at Danielle, as if measuring herself against a ghost that had suddenly become flesh again. Danielle didn't look back. She had no need to. Her silence spoke a language the bride couldn't answer. The rings were exchanged, the pronouncement spoken, applause scattered and hesitant. Marcus leaned in for the ceremonial kiss, but even as lips met, his mind spun elsewhere, to the woman seated with composure, to the sons who carried his reflection, to the life he had once dismissed and now could not escape. As the guests rose and music swelled again, Danielle stood slowly. She gathered her children, Carter steady at her side, and walked them toward the exit. No rush, no spectacle, just grace. People stepped aside instinctively, parting like water around a ship. Phones clicked, whispers followed, but Danielle kept her head high. To her, the day was already finished. She had rewritten the record simply by walking through that door. Outside, the afternoon sun greeted them, warm and steady, as though the sky itself had conspired to crown her exit. The limousine driver hurried to open the door, but Danielle waved him off. She let the boys climb in first, their laughter bubbling up now that the heavy air of the hall was behind them. Carter offered his hand. She accepted, stepping in without breaking her composure. On the steps behind, some guests spilled out, still buzzing with the shock of what they'd witnessed. A few reached for Danielle's name, whispering it like a secret now revealed. Others fumbled with explanations, trying to frame what they had just seen in stories they could carry home. But the truth was simple: the woman they thought broken had walked taller than anyone expected, and nothing would erase that image. Marcus lingered inside, pretending to listen as relatives congratulated him. His smile cracked at the edges, the weight of the moment pressing harder with every glance cast toward the doors she had passed through. The bride clung tighter to his arm, whispering sharp questions he couldn't answer. His heart pounded with the knowledge that the story of his wedding would never be about vows or rings. It would always begin with her arrival. The limousine pulled away, its tinted windows reflecting the last of the crowd. Inside, the boys had already loosened their ties, tumbling over one another with restless joy. Jalen leaned against Danielle's arm, his voice soft. "Mom, why did we have to come?" She kissed the top of his head, her words calm and certain. "Because sometimes the truth has to be seen, not just known." Carter met her eyes and nodded once, silently affirming what she already felt. Today was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her place in the story. As the city blurred by, Danielle rested her hand over Carter's and exhaled for the first time all day. She didn't need applause. She didn't need validation. She had her children, her peace, her future. And while the hall behind her drowned in whispers, she was already writing the next chapter. The car turned onto a quieter road, lined with trees bending in the summer breeze. Danielle rested her head briefly on Carter's shoulder, her eyes closing for a breath of stillness. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of her children's breathing wrapped her like a lullaby. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered more to herself than to him, "This chapter's closed." Carter kissed her temple. "Then let's start writing the next one." Danielle closed her eyes, whispering one last line into the hush of the room. "This is the life I was meant to live." If this story touched you, type "I choose peace." Share this with one person who needs a quiet kind of strength. Remember to subscribe to this channel for more story. Bye.